Brazil is recognised abroad for its natural beauty, for carnival, soccer, its joyful people and its warm welcome. It is also a democratic country in which the rights of all Brazilians are protected by the federal constitution. When faced with cases of unconstitutionality, the Brazilian society depends on a fundamental institution to ensure the rights of all citizens and fight corruption: the prosecution service. As a defender of citizens' rights, its mission is to ensure compliance with the Constitution and access to education, healthcare, transportation, leisure and safety for all citizens. Do you know how the prosecution service is structured? Under what circumstances it can act? That is what we are going to address now. The 1988 Constitution established that the prosecution service was to be an independent instance by separating it from the executive, the legislative and the judicial branches. The Constitution lays down the prosecution service's attributions in its chapter on essential services to ensuring justice. Firstly, let us begin by describing the Federal Prosecution Service's attributions. The Constitution states that this is the only competent agency to initiate criminal proceedings, the instrument through which a natural or legal person is formally charged with the commission of a crime. The Prosecution Service is also in charge of protecting the public interest, including diffuse rights such as peace, the environment and safety, and individual unalienable rights, such as the right to life and health. The structure of the Brazilian Prosecution Service matches the federative nature of the government. It is divided into state and federal prosecution services. The latter is further subdivided into 4 branches: federal, labor, military, and a branch for the federal district and territories. But our goal here is to explain how the institution known as MPF, Brazilian Federal Prosecution Service, works. This institution addresses constitutional, civil, criminal, and electoral matters throughout Brazil. It files lawsuits on behalf of society and prosecutes criminal complaints. The MPF also has a say in all cases involving public interest as heard by the federal courts. However, one needs to bear in mind that the MPF is only competent to file lawsuits and legal opinions. The power to judge remains a competence of the judiciary branch. Federal prosecutors are members of the MPF who act before federal judges. In their turn, circuit prosecutors are members of the MPF who act before circuit federal courts. Finally, associate federal prosecutors are members of the MPF who act before the Superior Court of Justice, while the Prosecutor General of the Republic acts before the Superior Electoral Court and the Brazilian Supreme Court. The MPF handles a broad range of subjects. Shall we have a look at them? The MPF works to ensure abidance by fundamental human rights, such as liberty, equality, and dignity. It enforces the Constitution, the federal laws, and the international treaties that Brazil is a part of. It can file actions for declaration of unconstitutionality, request federal intervention in the Federated States and in the Federal District, and institute federal competence for crimes committed against human rights. The MPF acts as a keeper of social rights in areas such as education, healthcare, housing, urban mobility, land tenure conflicts, retirement funds and social assistance. It also ensures that civil servants and public agencies comply with citizens' rights, such as access to information and justice, as well as the rights of children, teenagers, women, senior citizens and disabled persons. Additionally, it takes action against all forms of discrimination. The MPF strives to ensure government transparency and to safeguard the constitutional principles of legality, morality, impersonality, publicity and efficiency. To protect the assets, rights and values of all Brazilians, the MPF monitors the use of public funds to ensure that they are lawfully spent. When crimes are perpetrated against assets, services or interests of the Brazilian Union, which is the constitutional term employed to describe the Federation of the Brazilian States, or against government agencies and state-owned companies, the MPF is competent to act. Some examples are smuggling, embezzlement, crimes against the financial system, and pension scheme frauds. The MPF also fights against slave labour and cybercrime, including criminal offences such as disseminating child pornography, racism, and bank fraud. The MPF is committed to fighting corruption and the embezzlement of public funds from essential areas of interest to the Brazilian population. It is done so as to ascertain that offenders are punished in the criminal justice system, and so that misappropriated funds return to the public coffers. The MPF also plays an important role in monitoring, inspecting and controlling police activities to make sure that they abide by the law and by human rights. The Federal Prosecution Service works with other institutions to safeguard the fundamental rights of prisoners. It monitors the correct execution of sentences and the correct expenditure of public funds into prisons. The MPF helps enforce good consumer sales practices, therefore expanding consumers' choices and fighting violations of the Consumer Protection Code. This constitutes indeed a wide area of competence, as the MPF monitors areas such as telephone, transport, health insurance, banking, as well as energy and fuel-related services, to name but a few. Aware of the importance of preserving the environment, the MPF strives to keep the environment ecologically balanced for everyone. By enforcing laws, it addresses issues such as environmental licensing, genetically modified foods and animals, invasion and exploitation of protected areas, and wildlife trafficking. Another one of MPF's competencies is the protection of Brazilian cultural heritage. Its work involves preserving physical assets such as churches, monuments, archaeological sites, and intellectual assets, such as the forms of expression of certain communities. The MPF defends the rights of traditional groups and their lifestyles, such as indigenous peoples, the descendants of runaway slaves, gypsies and traditional communities who live off forest products or by the river banks or the seashore. The MPF proposes policies for the improvement of education and healthcare for them, mediates land tenure conflicts, and defends their right to be independent and preserve their culture. To ensure that citizens are guaranteed the right to elect their representatives through free voting, the MPF inspects all phases of the electoral process. If it identifies any electoral frauds, it files charges against their perpetrators. In cooperation with other countries, the MPF takes part in actions to fight organised crime, including drug trafficking and the smuggling of natural resources. It also fights money laundering and transnational corruption, and participates in restraining the accounts and proceeds of illegal activities. The MPF also participates in extradition procedures and in cases requiring international cooperation in criminal matters. It also plays an important role in civil matters involving maintenance actions, child abduction, and illegal adoption of infants. In addition to participate in international forums, the service promotes technical cooperation programs with the prosecution services of other countries. The work implemented here is carried out both internally and internationally, with a view to fostering justice and citizenship, as well as fighting crime and corruption. The MPF is committed to its principles of independence, transparency and ethics in order to guarantee that the Brazilian citizens have their rights preserved.